Have you ever felt people begin to resent you the moment you start loving yourself? One morning you awaken. Something within you has shifted. No longer a timid, flickering light, but a steady flame, the quiet power of someone beginning to live in truth. And then you notice that light unsettles others. A close friend begins to drift away. A colleague turns their back without explanation. A family member falls strangely silent. All because you are no longer the pliable version of yourself they once knew. Why does this happen? And more profoundly, what does it mean for the journey of your soul? In the moment you dare to say no to pretense, to expectations, to worn-out roles, the universe begins rearranging the sky above you. And sometimes that rearrangement feels like loss, like betrayal. But as Florence Scovel Shinn wrote, every great move forward begins with the ground shaking beneath your feet. They do not hate you. They hate the mirror you become, reflecting a truth they are not yet ready to face. Your courage has become a silent reminder of the compromises they've long made with fear, and your light is unbearable to those who have long lived in shadow. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the hidden parts of the psyche, buried deep, denied, unloved. Florence called it the law of resistance, the soul's longing met with internal revolt. Transformation always meets resistance, like sunlight breaking into a sealed room, like standing against the tide of inherited beliefs and watching the old world tremble. Have you ever quietly wondered, why am I being rejected for living more authentically? Why can't they celebrate my joy? Why does my self-love provoke their discomfort? If so, you are not alone. You are simply entering the most sacred stage of awakening, the stage of separation from the old tribe. Not out of pride, but out of integrity. Not to rebel, but to be free. In this video, we will peel back the layers of the psyche, shadow, projection, persona, individuation, the transcendent function, and hear the soul's whisper, keep going. Don't look back. In the first chapter, we'll explore why even gentle growth can provoke intense resistance from those around you. It is not your fault. It is because you are changing, and the universe always tests awakening souls with a season of solitude. Are you ready? Walk with me, and together we will not only understand why they resent you when you change, but learn how to turn that pain into the power of rebirth. But if you look more closely, not with your eyes but with quiet awareness, you will see you have done nothing wrong. You have simply brushed against a luminous region in yourself that others are not yet ready to encounter. Carl Jung spoke of this concealed realm as the shadow that which is suppressed, buried deep by the psyche, because it holds what is difficult to accept: vulnerability, jealousy, pettiness, old hurts, secret longings, fragments we deny to remain safe in the eyes of society. And the irony is, when you begin to integrate your shadow, that is to acknowledge that you too have been selfish, envious, weak, you do not become worse. You become more authentic. Jung wrote, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. When someone sees you daring to live your truth, daring to speak your truth, daring to embrace the darkness within you without shame, they are confronted with something deeply buried, something they have long refused to face. And instead of listening, many choose rejection. They shield themselves with judgment. They do not hate you. They fear themselves in your presence. Your presence becomes a psychological trigger. You become the mirror. And a mirror, if not used to look into, is often broken. Let me tell you about a woman I once worked with. Her name was Lisa. She had always been the pleasing one, the likable, the obliging, the self-sacrificing, the good listener. Yet Lisa began therapy. She began to say no. She stopped apologizing for things that weren't wrong. She set boundaries with her mother, the one who had controlled her childhood. And what happened? Her family called her selfish. Old friends said she had changed too much. Her workplace labeled her inflexible. But Lisa did not retreat. She had discovered something more precious than being liked: inner integrity. Jung said everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. When someone dislikes you, the first thing they do is not to understand you. They project, they cast their own shadow onto you. They see your confidence and label it arrogance. They see your success and call it pretentiousness. They see your self-love and brand it self-absorption. None of that reflects your truth. It is an echo of their fear. And sadly, the more authentically you live, the louder that echo grows. Within each of us lies an archetype, a soul pattern known as the light bringer. Those who carry light must pass through darkness. Like Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods to give to humankind, You are bringing light to yourself and to others, even if they are not yet ready to receive it. You do not need to persuade others to understand you. You only need not to abandon yourself. Thousands around the world are walking this path too. They awaken in a sleeping world. They choose truth over roles. They choose freedom over acceptance. And sometimes they need a place to be seen, not for explaining, but for being understood. If you are standing in the midst of that journey, leave a comment. I am returning to myself. We will see you as you truly are, and you will no longer feel alone. Preview of what comes next. Not only does the outside push back, your own mind will too. External resistance is just one half of the struggle. The other half lies within you, where you ask yourself, do I truly deserve to live honestly? Am I being selfish? Is there something wrong with loving myself? In the next part, we will explore the persona, the social mask each of us has worn sometimes for so long, we forget the face beneath. And you will discover that to live truthfully, sometimes the mask must fall. If you are ready to meet yourself, walk with me into what comes next. Truth is hard to digest, but it will gift you liberation in ways that any counterfeit love never could. Postcard prose in the voice of Jung, exploring persona and shadow work. There is a silent grief that many carry within. We do not know who we are when we are no longer performing. Since childhood, we learn to be good, to be loved, smart to be praised, strong to be respected, agreeable to avoid abandonment. But few have ever asked, who am I beneath these roles? Carl Jung named these roles the persona, the social mask each of us wears to adapt and belong. The persona is not inherently bad. It helps us navigate, relate, function. But when we overly identify with it, we lose touch with our deeper soul. A young woman may wear the mask of the good girl throughout her youth, obedient, helpful, undemanding. But later in marriage and work, she finds herself unable to say no, to set boundaries or express anger. Because the parts of her that were unpleasant, rebellious, honest, have long been buried in shadow. The brighter the persona, the darker the shadow. And when you begin to dismantle the persona, when you dare to live in truth, the system around you reacts. Family says you've changed. Friends whisper, you're not the same. But in truth, for the first time, you are becoming yourself. The shadow is not some evil nature. It is the collection of all you once rejected because the world told you those parts were unacceptable. Shadow work is not about eliminating the dark. It is about recognizing, dialoguing, and integrating it. As Jung wrote, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Here is a 5-step process, simple yet profound. 1. Observe strong, negative emotions. When someone triggers anger, jealousy, or inferiority, don't react immediately. Pause and write, where in me is this emotion truly coming from? 2. Ask the mirror question. Example, I hate people who brag. Ask, did I also once long for recognition, but was told it made me bad? 3. Journal a dialogue with the shadow. Name the part. The arrogant one, the abandoned child, the jealous twin. Write, me, why do you show up whenever someone is praised, shadow? Because I once needed to be seen too, and no one would look. 4. Learn to sit with shame without judgment. Jung said shame is a soul-eating emotion. Breathe with it. Write, I accept that part of me once felt small, once sought control, once envied others, and I no longer feel shame for that. 5. Integration. Live with your whole self. Once you've identified a part, transform it. Turn jealousy into inspiration. Turn anger into healthy boundaries. Turn inferiority into empathy. To integrate the shadow is to become whole, not perfect, but real. And here's the paradox. At that very moment, others may fear you most, because now you can no longer be manipulated. You no longer ask permission to live authentically. You no longer fill your emptiness by pleasing others. If you're beginning your shadow work journey, don't walk it alone. Leave a comment below. I am listening to the forgotten voice within me. Or share, what shadow have you faced in yourself? What helped you accept it? Our community is a sanctuary for courageous souls to be seen, to be understood, to be supported. When light and dark begin to merge, when you meet your shadow without judgment, something miraculous happens. You do not merely heal, you transform. A new energy awakens beyond good and bad, right or wrong. It is the union. It is transcendence. In the next part, we'll dive into Jung's concept of the transcendent function, where shadow and light no longer battle, but collaborate to give birth to your highest self. Walk with me. to the place where the soul no longer fears itself, but begins to soar. There are roles that were never written in ink. They were etched in glances of approval during childhood, in whispers that sounded like laws. You're such a good boy. Men don't cry. Don't bother anyone, sweet girl. And slowly we stopped living, we started performing. And the role we played became what we called myself. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, the psychological layer we wear to survive in the collective. The issue isn't that we wear masks. The danger is forgetting the face beneath. The one who's too kind to feel anger. Always says it's fine. Always forgives. Always gives in. But inside resentment builds. Back pain, tight throat, a heavy heart, because everything that should have been spoken was buried under pleasantness. The strong one who is never weak, always composed, independent, just fine. But at night alone in bed, tears fall. Not because someone hurt them, but because they were never allowed to be human. The empath who forgets themselves. They feel everything, absorb every sadness, heal others. But they don't know how to hold their own emptiness. They've become a mirror for others but are invisible to themselves. How to know which persona has claimed you, ask yourself. When I'm not needed, do I feel worthless? Am I afraid to be disliked for speaking my truth? Am I exhausted from always keeping it together? Have I told myself I'm not allowed to be wrong? If you answered yes, then you may be ruled by a persona you created and the resistance you feel from others. That's the signal. It's time to return to your true self. Jung wrote, the transcendent function arises from the union of conscious and unconscious contents. It's not a mechanical function. It is a living movement born when two opposing forces within you, light and dark logic and instinct, begin to speak. What happens when you let your inner opposites converse? You begin to realize you don't have to choose between being nice or being rebellious. You can be both in harmony. You don't have to pick between being generous or having boundaries. You can love and also say no. Your psyche ceases to be a battleground. It becomes a circle. Every part has a place. No one is exiled. No trait is banished. That is wholeness. That is true healing. A real-life glimpse. There was once a woman who had played the understanding girl all her life, never complained, never asked for more, always nodded. One day she sat down to journal. She let the angry child inside her speak. She cried, she screamed, she wrote, "I'm tired, I'm angry. I don't want to be the good one anymore." That was the moment the transcendent function arrived. She didn't become selfish. She became whole. Community connection, a place where masks can be removed. Have you discovered which persona has trapped you? Share it in the comments. I am removing the mask of, e.g., the good one, the perfect one, the helper, the unshakable one. We fellow travelers learning to live in truth will see you, understand you, and walk beside you. Here you don't have to perform. Here you are allowed to simply be. Preview of what comes next. Vision from healing to rebirth. Once shadow and light begin to integrate, something sacred emerges. Vision. Not a goal, not an achievement, but a call from the soul. How do I want to live when I no longer fear being disliked, misunderstood, or abandoned? In the next part, we will craft that vision. Not one shaped by others' expectations, but one born from the self, your truest, deepest core. If you are ready to meet the version of you that is waiting to rise, do not miss what comes next. There is a pain no one sees, the quiet ache of becoming who you truly are. It sounds beautiful, but anyone who's walked this path knows awakening is not just light. It is confusion. It is loneliness. It is the guilt of daring to change. Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And you feel this most when you begin to step out of the roles that once helped you survive. Silent betrayal, when you no longer want to perform. You used to be the kind one, always listening, always soft, always there when needed. You used to be the strong one, never shedding a tear. You used to be the modest one, the likable one. But one day your soul whispered, "I'm tired." And you began to pull back from what no longer felt true. You began to say no. You began to withdraw from relationships where you had to contort yourself. You began doing what made you feel alive, even if no one understood. And what happened? You felt guilt. Guilt for no longer being who they once knew. Guilt for disappointing them. Guilt for choosing yourself over their comfort. Inner conflict, when two selves pull in opposite directions. One part of you pleads, "Just go back to how you were." It'll make others happy. The other part whispers, but that's not me anymore. You stand at that threshold. No one sees it. On the outside, you're still smiling. But inside is a war, a psychological battle between safety and truth. Jung called this moment polarization, when consciousness and the unconscious collide before they unite. And in that collision, a doorway opens. Vision. When you stop seeing yourself through others' eyes. Close your eyes. Imagine this. If no one expected anything from you, if you didn't have to be right or good or successful, how would you live? A true vision is not a checklist of achievements. It is the story you choose to tell about yourself when no one else is holding the pen. A practice: rewrite your vision in the voice of the self. 1. Image. Where do you see yourself on your most peaceful morning? What are you doing? Who are you with? 2. Feeling. What emotions fill you? Peace, freedom, aliveness, authenticity. 3. Values. What truly matters to you? Not because you were taught so, but because your soul needs it. 4. Boundaries. What will you no longer tolerate? Not out of resentment, but self-respect. 5. Commitment. What small step will you take to come closer to your authentic self? Example: a short vision from the self. I choose to live slowly. I no longer apologize for needing space. I create not to be famous, but because it is how I breathe. I do not belong to any crowd. I am my own rhythm. Community connection. Are you ready to rewrite your story? If you find yourself standing at that turning point, comment, I am rewriting my life in the voice of my soul. And if you've already stepped out of an old role, share what gave you the courage. Our community doesn't need you to be perfect. We just need you to be real. What's next? Jung's reminder. Live as though your soul has awakened. In the end, awakening isn't about becoming more spiritual. It's about living closer to yourself. In the final part, we'll reflect on the full journey from shadow to awareness to integration and finally embodiment. You don't have to chase the light. You are the light when you no longer fear your own being. Part 5, Main Body Postcard. Prose in the voice of Jung, awakening, embodiment, and the return to the true self. You've walked through shadow. You've faced the parts of yourself once denied. You've taken off the mask, released the old roles, and begun rewriting your story in the voice of your soul. And now the greatest question arises. How do I live each day as a soul that has awakened? Carl Jung called this stage embodiment. It is when the truth you've discovered no longer lives only in your awareness. It begins to breathe through your choices, your habits, your daily gestures. No more hiding in theory. No more seeking approval. All that remain is you and the honest decision to live in truth. Embodying the self. You don't need to become. You only need to allow. In a world that measures everything by achievement, speed, applause, living slowly, deeply, and truthfully is often seen as rebellion. But in that very rebellion, you return to your most natural rhythm. You don't need to be more. You need to be more real. You don't need to know more. You need to listen more to yourself. The self doesn't shout, it whispers, and you must be quiet enough to hear. How to live as a soul that has awakened. 1. Begin the day with connection, not with your phone, not with your inbox, but with a single breath and a question. What feels true for me today? 2. Choose response over reaction. When someone hurts you, your old reflex may be defense. But pause and ask, what part of me just got touched? That one question keeps you rooted in self and not pulled back into the old role. 3. Set boundaries as an act of love. Not to push others away, but to keep your soul from dissolving. 4. Slow down so your soul can catch up. Jung once said, hurry is not of the devil. Hurry is the devil. Hurry kills intuition. Allow yourself to move at your own pace, even if the world screams for speed. 5. Create space for your inner life to unfold. A corner for silence, a journal page, a walk without headphones, a meal without social media. You don't need more. You need deeper. The self is not a destination, it is a daily return. There will be days you forget yourself. Moments when you slip into the old role. Do not judge, do not despair. Remember, the self doesn't ask for perfection. It simply invites you to return again and again. Leave a comment below. I choose to live in truth even if the world doesn't understand. Or share. What small action did you take today that brought you closer to yourself? What makes you feel most like you? We, those also learning to live slow, deep, and real, are here to listen. Coming next, conclusion. The journey isn't over. It has just begun. To live as an awakened self is not a one-time achievement. It is a lifelong journey. Unmasking, facing the shadow, integrating, rewriting the narrative, embodying. In the final part, I will offer you one last reflection, a closing reminder from Jung on why living in truth, though often lonely and hard, is the only path to true freedom. Because as Jung wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. There's something no one warns you about. When you begin living truthfully, you will be rejected. Not because you're wrong, but because you no longer fit the old story others wrote for you. They'll say you've changed too much. Your family might say, we don't recognize you anymore. Old friends will drift away as if you've done something wrong. But in truth, you've simply become honest with your soul. Why does rejection hurt so deeply? Carl Jung once wrote, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Not because your true self is terrifying, but because that acceptance demands a cost, the sense of belonging you once clung to. Since childhood, we were taught to be loved. We must become what others expect. So when you begin to speak your truth, you don't just break their expectations, you awaken your deepest fear being left behind. A real story, the woman who chose truth over the understanding role. She had always been the go-to person, gentle, non-judgmental, always there with wise words. But deep inside, she began to feel tired. Tired of never being asked, and how are you? Tired of holding space for everyone, but never being held. One day, she quietly stepped away from a friendship where she always had to be strong. And when she was no longer the same, the other person called her selfish. It hurt, but her soul whispered, at last you chose yourself. Others' reactions are a test of your loyalty to yourself. When you live truthfully, the ones who remain are those who love you, not for how well you perform, but for how fully you show up. Jung called this a natural separation. When your soul rises to a new frequency, connections that no longer resonate fall away, not out of blame, but out of rhythm. How to stay rooted in your truth. When the world shakes one, create an inner circle. Write down 3 people around whom you feel safe being fully yourself. If the list is empty, start with you. 2, remember why you started. You didn't begin this journey for applause. You started because you were exhausted from pretending. 3, forgive yourself for feeling lonely. You're not weak for craving love. You are simply human. 4, don't shrink to fit again. Memories may tempt you to go back, but the self, your deepest truth, never retreats. If you've ever been rejected simply for being real, comment below. I no longer fit, and that means I'm growing. Share a moment when you were called strange, different, or distant, and what gave you the strength to stay true. Let's build a community where rejection isn't a wound, but a sign of transformation. Coming next, light after the cut. New connections that are born when you're real. Don't worry about who will stay. Because when you live authentically, you send out a frequency, and those tuned to the same light will find you. Not with noise, not with demands, but like light finding light. In the next part, we'll explore what happens when you stop trying to be loved. And you'll realize real love doesn't need you to perform. It only needs you to be you. When you stop trying to be loved, you begin to touch a different kind of connection, not love out of need, but love as presence. And then something paradoxical happens. Only when you stop pleasing do the right people begin to appear. No longer drawn to your kindness, your talent, your beauty, they stay because of your truth. Love from the self, not a reward, but a resonance, Jung once wrote. The meeting of 2 personalities is like the contact of 2 chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. When someone lives authentically, they no longer love to fill a void. They love to share. They don't say, I need you to feel valuable. They say, I already know my worth, and I want to live it beside you. The psychology of true connection. When the masks drop, you become magnetic psychologists. Call this resonance-based relationships, connections that arise from vibration, not fear. You don't have to explain yourself to be understood. You don't have to prove your worth to be trusted, because your presence already speaks. When the self is embodied, it emits its own signal, a quiet transparency that draws others in, not through effort, but through truth. Signs you're attracting soul-based relationships. You feel safe in shared silence. You don't second-guess what to say to be loved. You're not punished for your honest emotions. You're not afraid of losing them if you're not perfect. Most of all, You no longer fear being too much or not enough, because you know those tuned to your frequency will hear the call of your soul. A story to souls who met without mass. He was a man who had lived his whole life pleasing his mother. She was a woman who had armored herself with independence. They both stepped away from their old roles. And on their first meeting, they didn't ask, "What do you do?" They asked, "What has made you feel alive lately?" From that moment, a connection was born, not from performance, but from presence. If you haven't met that kind of connection, yet don't despair. Keep living truthfully. Every time you choose truth over performance, you send a signal to the universe. I'm ready to be seen without the shell. And sooner or later, you'll meet someone who says, "Me too." Leave a comment. I choose to live truthfully and trust in real connection. Share a story of when you met someone with whom you could just be. Or if you're still seeking, leave this affirmation. I am worthy of unconditional love. We those also learning to open will see you. Because light always recognizes light even when it's just beginning to shine. Coming next, the final chapter. Living as an awakened soul in the world. You've taken off the mask. You've walked through shadow. You've rewritten the story. You've embodied yourself. Now comes the final whisper from Jung. A reminder that this journey wasn't meant to take you out of the world, but to bring you into it as a soul whole and awake. The next part will be a closing gift to remind you you are not alone, and you never need permission to be you. There comes a moment the soul will never forget, the moment you realize you no longer need to become anyone. No more proving, no more chasing approval, no more running from yourself. You simply are, and in that being, everything shifts. The outer world may look the same, but the inner world has entered another dimension. As Jung wrote in the Red Book, you are the way and the goal. That is why you must go your way. You have walked a journey deeper than any book could teach. You've seen your shadow. What once terrified you has become the doorway. You've removed your persona and still found yourself worthy of love. You've heard the whisper of the self, not loud but unwavering. You've learned to stand alone but no longer feel lonely. And you've met souls who match your frequency, not because you performed, but because you were real. Inner union, an ending or a beginning. Jung called this individuation the process of becoming whole. Not perfect, whole. It means you embrace shadow and light, wounds and passion, fear and truth, and live with all of it without tearing yourself apart. You are no longer a fragment in someone else's story. You are the whole painting, alive, breathing, and touching others through your presence alone. From awakened being to soulful presence in the world. Many believe awakening is the destination, but in truth, it's just the beginning. Because the self doesn't emerge just to make you feel better. It emerges so you can walk the earth as a living reminder. There is another way, deeper, truer, more healing. You don't have to teach. Just be deeply yourself, and others will remember. They have a self too. Final practice: embody each day as an awakened soul. Each morning, place a hand on your heart and ask, what truth needs to live through me today? Each evening, write down one moment when you chose truth over fear. Each week, do one thing not to please others, but simply to make your soul smile. And each month, release one fear so you can walk lighter through your own becoming. If you're walking the path of awakening, comment below, I am living as though my soul has awakened. Share one small thing you do each day to live more honestly, more deeply, and more soulfully. And if you know someone who may need this message, send them this video. Because every journey of awakening begins with the right reminder at the right time. Coming next, final blessing, Jung's parting whisper to the soul. We are about to close the video, but the journey has only just begun. In the final chapter, I will read you a passage from Jung, a blessing, a soul-sent prayer for your transformation. Because if you've had the courage to remove the mask, to walk through shadow, to reclaim yourself, then you now have the courage to live as light without asking for permission. Perhaps you're sitting in front of a screen in a quiet room or in the middle of life's many noises. Whoever you are, wherever you are, I invite you to pause just for a breath and feel one simple truth. You have come a long way. Not everyone dares to step out of familiar roles. Not everyone has the courage to face the shadow within, and certainly not everyone chooses to live honestly, even when it means solitude, misunderstanding, and pain. But you have done that, and in this very moment, your self is quietly blooming. You don't need to complete the journey. You only need to be present. Jung once said, we meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. Life doesn't demand that you always stand strong. It only asks that you be honest each time you find yourself at a crossroad. So if tomorrow you forget, it's okay. If you unconsciously wear the mask again, it's not a failure. All that matters is that you return as often as you can. Because returning to the self is not a destination. It is a daily act of devotion. Connection doesn't end, it evolves. If something deep within you stirred during this video, it may be because part of you is ready to be seen. I invite you to comment below. I am ready to live truthfully with both my light and my shadow. Share one small thing you want to change, one truth you want to honor, or simply the feeling this video leaves in you. We read every word, we hear every voice, because this space is a healing circle. You don't have to walk this path alone. If you'd like to continue the journey, consider subscribing. Not for numbers, but because every future video will be a small light, reminding you, you're not lost, you're simply returning. Final blessing, live as though your soul has awakened. The world may not applaud. The road may be unclear without signs, but in that very uncertainty, you will meet yourself again, whole, free, deeply alive. And when your eyes meet another's, you'll know, we have known pain, but now we are truly living. Thank you for being here. If this message touched you, leave a dot, a whisper, a light in the comments. Because perhaps what you share will be the flame for another soul who is still finding their way home. Until we meet again in the next video where the journey of becoming continues to unfold. No more fear, only quiet light, and the fullness of being.